So we just finished the largest event of the year, the CRM User Group Summit 2019 in the US. The event continues to grow year after year. Even though I guess the location, the venue this year was a little bit smaller than last year. It was a great event as always. I really love to spend time with the community. Really love to spend time with users and administrators and people who use the system day in and day out. And it's always interesting because one of the things that are important for the event is that users out there who perhaps work at an organization that doesn't even have a partner that they work with, when it comes to the implementation of Dynamics 365, or when it comes to the, day-to-day operation of Dynamics 365, or maybe the partner they're working with doesn't really have a Microsoft MVP in staff. They really have the opportunity to interact with us, to ask questions, to attend sessions from MVPs, and it is not likely that the partner that you're working with will have an MVP in staff. There's about 100 in the world, and there's not a whole lot of us out there, right? So there are thousands of partners. I don't know if there's thousands of partners. I assume there's thousands of partners, but there's for sure hundreds of partners. So the chances of having, a partner that will have MVPs in staff are very, very small. So if you do have a partner that has MVPs, and more than that, if those MVPs happen to be your solution architect or happen to be working with you directly on your implementation, that's a really good thing. You get to experience that firsthand interaction, with an MVP. But the interesting part about it is that for the people who are new to the event, or for the people that are new to this world of Microsoft MVPs, there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of MVPs, what we do, what we are, who we are. And, it happened to me the first time I went to a large event, which was Microsoft Convergence in 2012. It was my first and only event that I attended as a non-MVP. The next event that I attended after that was the CRM UG Summit 2012, which was my first event as an MVP. I received my MVP award in July of 2012. So Convergence was in, I believe it was March of 2012. And it was interesting because for me, the Microsoft MVP world, there were about 40 at that time. It was a big question mark. Like it was this gray area. I knew about the MVP program, but I didn't really know what the MVPs did or who they were. So it's interesting now that I've been to so many events. I mean, if you think about it, on average, let's say I go to 4 or 5 events a year as an MVP. If I count the Dynamics 365 Saturday events, then I would say, like 8 events a year. So since 2012, that's been 7 years. So I've been to about 50 events as an MVP, let's just say. You do get to hear the same kind of misconceptions once in a while, and not just at events. You do get to hear them and just online, or people that reach out to me at info@crmmvppodcast.com, or just directly through Twitter or whatever it is. They have these misconceptions about MVPs. And for those of you who are aspiring MVPs out there, and for those of you who are just curious about this world, I wanted to talk about what are those frequent misconceptions about Microsoft MVPs. I don't want to go too deep into what the program is. I think that there's a lot of information about that, but I want to talk about what the program is not. I think that is one thing that there's not a whole lot of information out there about. I think that you will find a lot of blog articles and podcasts about what the program is and how to get in, and tips and articles about what's the best way to make it happen. We have recorded shows about that. We have recorded shows about what's the best course of action if you are a aspiring MVP. We have recorded episodes about common mistakes that aspiring MVPs make. Very, very popular episodes, by the way, in terms of downloads and people tuning in and comments and questions about that. But again, not a whole lot out there about common misconceptions or things that MVPs are not. So I wrote down a list of frequent misconceptions that I heard this week at the CRM Summit, and that I've heard, again, over the last few years. So again, these are not in any particular order. And obviously, I thought about making it a top 10 list. But there's more than 10. I think I wrote about 20 or so, and I started consolidating some of them. So I don't know. There's about 17 or so on this list. So let's go and talk about them. Again, this is not a technical episode, so if you were looking for that, if you wanted more of a technical, Dynamics 365 pure power platform episode, this is not it. You can stop listening to it if you want. And this is more of a informational, fun episode. Hopefully, I'll get to think about some, stories from the MVP Summit or just ways in which I can explain some of these to you, and just try to make it fun. But again, there's no agenda or script, obviously, as you know on my episodes. There's no script that I follow, so we'll see how it goes. But the top misconception, which again for some of you this will sound ridiculous, but the one that I get the most is that most people think that we work for Microsoft. Obviously, I don't blame them because it's on the title, Microsoft MVP. So most people think that we work for Microsoft. And it happens a lot, especially when I help people for free, which I do all the time. Not just me, but a lot of MVPs do that. That's kind of how you get awarded. The MVP award is by helping people out in the community without getting paid for it, just helping people get the most out of Dynamics 365 or whatever other Microsoft technology you happen to work with, Exchange, SharePoint, whatever it is. So sometimes you get to help people out there at an event or online. You get to answer a question or whatever it is. I happen to be what is known as a PCSM, or as a partner customer success manager. So I get to work sometimes with customers, and Microsoft brings me in to help them get over the hurdle. And they happen to be working with a partner. I legitimately don't want to take business from anybody. I'm just trying to help them out 100%. And they believe that I work for Microsoft. And in a lot of cases, I don't necessarily correct them. Like if they think I work for Microsoft and I help them and they think Microsoft helped them get over that hurdle, then that's fine. I did my job. I don't need them to know that I work for Elevate Solutions or whatever. That's fine, because I'm not looking for their business. I'm legitimately helping them out. So, one of the things that happens a lot is that people believe that MVPs work for Microsoft. And the funny thing about that is that it is impossible to work for Microsoft and be an MVP. It's actually I don't know if it's on the MVP rulebook, if that's a thing, but on the conditions, it says that in order for you to be a Microsoft MVP, you have to, not work for Microsoft. And if I think about, since I've become an MVP, I feel like about 10 people or so, 10 to 15 people or so have lost their MVP award. I think that about half or maybe more than half of those individuals that lost the MVP award while I've been an MVP have been because they joined Microsoft. So they lost it immediately as soon as they joined Microsoft. And I don't want to name any names that stand out or anyone or anything like that, but one of the ones that stand out the most, and this just popped in my head, I wasn't even planning on giving this example, but Jacob Cinnamon Murphy, I remember his name specifically because the day he received his MVP award, he announced he started to work with Microsoft. So he was an MVP for exactly one day, which was insane coincidence, right? Because you never know when it's coming. That's the thing with the MVP award. It's not like you get heads up. It's not like, hey, by the way, July 1st, it's coming. Get ready for it. Make space on your, nightstand for it or whatever. That's not how it works. It's kind of out of the blue. You're out there just like, doing your thing, going about your day, and all of a sudden, boom, you get an email that says congratulations on your MVP award. Now, obviously, if you're a community leader, you're kind of like hoping for it, you're kind of expecting it. This is not completely out of the blue. It's not like if you're doing nothing, you're gonna get the MVP award. That's not how it works. You guys already know that. You probably know that because you're probably doing a lot and you're not getting it, right? There's a lot of people out there that feel like they're doing a whole lot of work or a whole lot of contribution for the community and they're not getting the award. I get that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, about some other misconceptions about whether MVPs have any say on who gets the award and who doesn't. But, there is, once again, the interesting part about Jacob Cinnamon Murphy is that he got the award. So I assume he was kind of expecting it or hoping for it or whatever it is. But again, life moves on. You have to keep going. And, I assume it took months, or it took time for him to think about it and consider a position with Microsoft. And eventually he accepted the position. And literally, like, the day he started, like his first day at work, it was like, I don't know, I'm just gonna name something. If I get this wrong, I apologize. But let's say September 1st. September 1st came in, and on like the same post, he announced he received the MVP award and that it was his first day at Microsoft. So he lost the MVP award on the same day. So that was an interesting coincidence. So I think Jacob is still at Microsoft, killing it over there. I really like Jacob. He's a really, really great guy. I was really happy that he went to Microsoft. Every time, somebody that I really respect and like goes to Microsoft is a win for me. So I hope he's still killing it over there. All right, so that is, again, misconception number one, which is we work for Microsoft. We don't work for Microsoft. We're independent. We're outside of Microsoft, and that's why, we are able to essentially provide, in a lot of cases, the real world perspective and opinion that Microsoft can provide, because Microsoft is, busy creating the product that we know and love, and we are the ones that are actually selling it and implementing it. So we are the ones that provide that perspective. So again, misconception number one, we work for Microsoft. That's not true. None of us work for Microsoft. We can't work for Microsoft. If we did, we wouldn't be MVPs. We would be MVP alumni. I guess that would be the title that we would be considered, former MVPs. Now, we have a saying on the family, because that's how we call it, the MVP family, at least within the CRM space. And I get it. We are not called the CRM MVPs. I continue to call it CRM MVP, just like I continue to call it CRM UG Summit, not UG Summit or Power Platform Summit, whatever they call it these days. Doesn't matter. I call it CRM UG Summit. I call it the CRM, MVP family. Once you're an MVP, you're always an MVP. For people that have lost their MVP awards for one reason or another, people have lost it because of work, because of family, because of, health reasons, whatever it is. They are always considered part of the family. And, we kind of stay close in a lot of cases, at least for the most part. So, I've had really good friends. One good example is Ronald Lemon. Really good example. I think Ronald lost his MVP award back in, I don't know, if I had to guess, 2014, 2015. I saw Ronald earlier this year in Amsterdam. And every time I go to Amsterdam, we get together, hang out, have a few beers, and, consider him, my brother in Netherlands. So we have a, great family going on. Once you're a part of the family, kind of, you're always part of the family. So that's awesome. But anyway, a little bit too much information for number one. Number two, misconception about MVPs is that we know everything. And that is, I hear this in a couple of different ways. Number one is the expectation that we know everything, just like you approach an MVP and you ask something and then you're highly disappointed when we don't know the answer. I'm always bummed out when I don't know the answer, not because I don't know the answer, because I don't know everything, but because you think I know everything and then I don't, and you feel like disappointed. And I'm really bummed out that I disappointed you. It happened at the CRM Summit in Australia. So this year, I'm lucky to be, I believe, one of the only two people in the world outside of the Dynamic community staff, the people that organize the event. I think me and Rachel Profit are the only two people that are speaking at all three summits. So the one in Europe, the one in Australia, and the one in the US. Rachel Profit is an MVP for the ERP stuff, so finance and operations and stuff, and I'm on the CRM side. And you would have people that walk in and either add a question about finance and operations or ask a question about let me think about portals, or they'll have a question about something that I just don't know everything about it. Like they'll walk in and literally ask a question about liquid or whatever. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I don't work with portals. Everything about portals, I defer to Nick Hayduk. Like that's my portal dude. And that's who I go to. I don't have to learn that stuff. And so one misconception about MVPs is that people believe we know everything. Now, there are a lot of MVPs out there that know a lot of things about a lot of things, but we don't know everything. I think that when it comes to MVPs, you will find that the most common theme is that we all have kind of our strengths and weaknesses, right? I think that a few years ago, maybe up to CRM 2015 or so, most of us will know everything, like quote unquote, we knew everything because, CRM was small-ish. We were talking about perhaps 150 entities or so and a few components like sales, customer service, and marketing. There was a very limited amount of things you could do out of the box. A lot of it you had to build after the fact. So when it came to what's possible out of the box, we kind of knew everything that was possible out of the box. But Microsoft has been on a complete rampage of adding functionality, amazing functionality. I love what they're doing, what they've been doing for the last few years. So I'm not complaining about this. But because of that amazing rampage they've been on, it's been really, really hard to just know everything. So I don't think there's anyone out there that can know everything, that is an expert on everything. But that's the beauty about the MVP family, that I can always default to somebody else to answer a question. I was really lucky at the CRMEG Summit in Australia that I could turn around and get Andre Margono, who knows a lot more about a lot more stuff than me. I can turn around and get, again, somebody else, Rami, whoever, that could help me out, answer some questions that I wasn't aware of. And then, as soon as somebody else came in and had a question about workflows or had a question about something that I was very familiar with, I will be all over that, right? So we can tag team, and we had the ability to do that. It also happened at the CRMG Summit here in the US, where people will walk in and ask a question. In a lot of cases, people will walk in and I would just play kind of I don't know, like the connector, right? So people walk in, ask a question, I'll just pull like, hey, you answer this question. Hey, you answer that question, right? So anything about infrastructure, Chris Cognetta, you answer that. Anything about this, you answer. So I would be the one kind of like, by being part of the family, you kind of get familiar with the strengths and weaknesses of a lot of people within the family. There's still a few MVPs out there, especially if you don't live in the US. Like, we have MVPs from China and things like that I don't interact with in a regular basis like I do with the people in the US and Canada, and to some extent in a lot of other countries, especially in Europe, that I know them and I kind of understand their strengths and weaknesses. So if anyone comes with a question, I know who can I talk to, right? Who I can redirect them to if I think it would make more sense for that. So again, the idea that we know everything, common misconception. We don't know everything, but in a lot of cases, we can find the right person that knows that little piece of information they're looking for. Just don't be disappointed. All right? Don't expect that we know everything. If we don't know it, don't worry about it. We'll try to help you out regardless. All right, misconception number 3 is that we're all great public speakers, or we love to be on camera, or we love to be in front of an audience, and so on and so forth. That's not all true. Not all MVPs are like that. I happen to love that stuff. I happen to love to be in front of an audience. I volunteer for stuff like that. I'm not afraid of it. I don't know if I like it. It's just that it doesn't bother me, like, yeah, I'll be the one raising my hand where it says, okay, can somebody get on stage and be in front of, this thing is going to be televised to 5 million people. Cool. Yeah, I'll do it. Like it doesn't bother me at all, but that doesn't mean that every single MVP loves that. Right. There are MVPs like I had to, Andre Margono, for example, we were talking about him. He did a 2-Minute Tuesday about portals, and he killed it. He did a great job, but he was so nervous about it. He's never been on camera, and he's like, I don't know if I can do this. And like, whereas for me, you ask me, it's like, hey, do you want to jump on the camera and talk about, yes, absolutely, let's do it. Like, I don't even think about it twice because I don't mind. It just doesn't matter to me. It's a non-issue. So not everyone is a great public speaker. Not everyone is, can jump in front of an audience and deliver something. So that is another misconception. And that one comes from, in a lot of cases, people coming in and say, well, why don't you just invite another one of your MVP buddies and you guys can, put a panel together and deliver this. Well, it's not that easy. Not every MVP wants to be in a panel. We have a lot of MVPs who are developers, create great tools, and they just don't want to be presenting in front of an audience. We do have developers that are great and are great presenting in front of an audience. You look at Daryl Labar, you look at Jason Latimer, like these guys are great developers and great presenters too, but not everyone is like that. So that is another misconception. Speaking of Labar and Latimer, that they're all developers, that we're all developers. All MVPs are developers. That is not true. I think that I'm a great example. I think Steve Mordew is an even greater example. That we're not all developers. So definitely not. I mean, I think that when push comes to shove, we can read code and understand it and even write some of it. But, I don't find it enjoyable that I have to sit down for 2 hours to write a plugin or to write a custom report or something like that. I don't think that's something that I enjoy. Just like, someone might not enjoy getting in front of an audience for 1 or 2 hours and talk about CRM administration or something like that. So again, I'm not a developer. There's a ton of MVPs that are not developers. There's a ton of MVPs that are developers as well, but we're not all developers. So that is another misconception about it. If you see someone who's an MVP, don't immediately start asking a bunch of development questions, expecting that we're all development experts. That's not how it works. We're not all like that. I think that we have amazing talent, obviously, on the MVP pool for developers. I just mentioned, Daryl Labar. I mentioned Jason Latimer. If you think about the guys who work on the XRM toolbox, like Jonas Rapp, like Tanguy, Scott in the UK. Scott Duro. So, I mean, there's just so many amazing developers. I'm talking about top 10 in the world developers for Dynamics 365 happen to be MVPs as well. There's a lot of great developers, but we're not all developers. So, just be mindful of that as well. The other misconception about MVP, and I got this week as well, especially because I'm very public and, like I just mentioned, I happen to be lucky enough to attend the summit in Europe and the summit in Australia and the summit in the US, is that we all travel all the time. All the MVPs travel all the time. That's not true. I think that several of us travel. I don't even think I travel all the time. I think that, I think if you ask my wife, she would say I travel all the time. I don't think I travel all the time. If you think about it, if I look at my travel, I would say I travel 30% of the time. So I would say maybe 1 week out of the month, maybe 2 weeks out of the month at the most. But I don't even think I'm gone 2 weeks out of the month. I can't even remember the last month or the last time I was gone for like half the month, like for more than 2 months in a row. I just don't remember that. And in this industry, in this job, especially as an implementer, because I happen to be an MVP, but my real job is a solution architect. I implement this stuff for a living. As an implementer, the fact that you travel only 25% of the time or less, it's amazing. So yeah, if you ask my wife, she would say I'm gone all the time, but in reality, I'm not. I travel, but I don't travel a lot. I'm pretty selective with the places I go. In some cases, I don't get to choose, right? In some cases, I have to go, whatever I have to go. But in a lot of cases, I get to be selective on the places I go to. There are some MVPs that travel 90% of the time. So yes, it is true. Some MVPs travel all the time. But the idea that in order for you to be an MVP, you have to be willing to travel all the time and speak at every event and be at every CRMG meeting and be at every, whatever, conference. That's not true. You don't have to do that. There are MVPs that I only see once a year at the MVP Summit. And there are MVPs that I never see. They don't even go to the once a year MVP Summit conference, right? So no, not all MVPs travel all the time. Next on the list of misconceptions is that we decide who becomes an MVP. MVPs decide who become an MVP. That's not true at all. We actually have no say whatsoever on who becomes an MVP. And that is another misconception, even amongst the people who, are aspiring MVPs. And I think that in some cases, those rumors are started by even MVPs that will make it sound like they have some power in the process, like, oh, let me look into it or whatever to make people feel better about it. But in reality, we have no power at all about it. So just being honest with you guys, the best we can do is nominate people that we believe deserve the award. But once a nomination is placed, so once I say so and so I believe deserves to be considered for the award, it's off my hands. Like I can't do anything beyond that. And once somebody's nominated, no one else can nominate that person, again. So if I take, John Doe and I try to nominate John Doe and somebody else already nominated John Doe, I get an error that says, this person was already nominated by someone else. Okay, cool. It's already in the queue to be considered to be an MVP. After that, we have nothing else that we can do. And our main contact with Microsoft is our, let's say, an MVP liaison, which is a contact between us and the product team, the team that creates the product that you happen to be an MVP for. In my case, is Dynamics 365. So that person I can ask, like, hey, I applied for such and such, what's going on? And the best they can do is say, I haven't seen an application, or I have seen an application, but there's nothing really they can, it's not like they can say like, oh, okay, you want them to be an MVP? Cool, let me approve it. Of course I want them to be an MVP because I apply for them. Like, why would I submit an application and then answer no, right? So there's really nothing we can do other than submit your name to become an MVP. Other than that, there's really no power. We don't get to vote. We don't get to veto people either. Obviously, in order for you to become an MVP, you have to be nominated. So if you do something stupid out there, we talked about mistakes that aspiring MVPs make. There's a whole episode about this. You can go back and listen to that if you haven't done so. If you want to become an MVP, go back and listen to that. If you do something stupid and no MVP nominates you, then you'll never become an MVP, obviously. Now, Microsoft employees can also nominate MVPs. That's how I became an MVP. No MVP nominated me. It was a Microsoft employee who nominated me. But I think that I can't remember the last MVP who got their award because he was nominated by a Microsoft employee. I don't think that's the norm these days. I think that most MVPs are getting nominated by other MVPs. And if you're listening to this and you're an MVP, I know that, CRM MVPs listen to this. If you were nominated by a Microsoft employee, just let me know, because I would like to know. I legitimately don't know any MVP on like the last 5 years that was nominated by a Microsoft person. Every single case that I know has been done by an MVP, by another MVP, or multiple MVPs trying to nominate him or her. And I think that's the best way to do it. I think that us as MVPs are the best ones to gauge who is an asset to the community, who has been contributing, consistently, who has contributions that are valuable, because it's not all about volume. You will notice that there are people out there on the community that are just adding a bunch of just straight up garbage on the community. It adds no value whatsoever. Yeah, there's a lot of volumes. You can claim you have 1 million tweets, but so what? Like it adds no value. It's not helping anyone get the most out of the Dynamics 365. So in my eyes, I will never nominate you, and no other MVP will nominate you, right? You have to provide value. So it's not only the quantity, it's also the value behind it. So that's one thing to think about. So again, we don't decide who becomes an MVP. We only get to nominate you. But obviously, if you don't get someone to nominate you, you'll never become an MVP. So it's kind of like we indirectly decide who becomes an MVP, because if you don't get nominated, you'll never become an MVP. But once you get nominated, we don't really directly decide it. That's up to Microsoft to decide whether you make it or not. And that process, by the way, is a black box. It's not transparent. We don't know at all. Like once submit your name, we never hear anything else. It's not like it's a portal where there's like a business process flow that shows you like, oh, here's where you are, and this is how many days it has been in this stage, and here are the steps, and who's played, who's next, what action is. No, 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 no. None of that happens. You submitted. Microsoft has a process behind the scenes, something they keep secret, which is fine. Like that's the way it's been since I received my award, since the first MVP received their award. It's been a black box forever and ever, and it will probably be a black box forever and ever. But we don't really know, what happens after that. Next, I think and this one I could have merged with the previous one on who this, the fact that we don't decide who becomes an MVP. But another misconception is that, we don't want other people to become MVPs. That's, I mean, at least from my perspective, I think that this is nothing further from the truth. I wish we had 1,000 MVPs. We have about 100, but I'm always bummed out when people, start very promising, start sharing a ton of information on the community, start being a great asset, and then they just fizzle out, right? They stop. I don't know if they were doing it because they wanted that MVP award, and after they've been doing it for like 6 months, they're sort of like, yeah, it's not worth it. I don't want to do it anymore. I think that, we've talked about it a bunch of times that this job, I don't want to call it a job, but this whole lifestyle of being an MVP requires a special kind of person that just enjoys doing that. Like I'm recording this podcast, nobody's paying me to do this. I just enjoy doing this. I enjoy, getting Adobe Audition and hitting record, and here we go, just talking about it for an hour, and that you guys get to listen to this. So if you do this because you expect some kind of award, because that is what you're going for, then yeah, it's gonna get pretty old, pretty quick. So it's the idea that other MVPs don't want more MVPs to join the family is ridiculous to me. I don't know any other MVP that applies to. I think that, every single MVP I know, at least that I know of, wants more people. Not only wants more people, but we want more diversity. We want, people from other nations, and we want more women. We want people from minorities. We want other opinions. There's no reason for us to have just the same 10 people in a little room sitting down with the same opinions and the same ideas. How is that going to improve Dynamics 365 for everybody? How is that going to improve, the community as a whole? We need new blood. We need new people. We need more of you joining the family. We want more of you, you joining the family. So, the idea that, this is a close family and we don't want more people to join is nothing further from the truth. We want more people. So, yeah, that's another misconception that I see out there. Next on the list is that we are all working for a partner. We're all pros. I think that's the one that is closest to the truth. But we're not all pros. You don't have to be a pro. And a pro, I mean, you get paid to implement Dynamics 365 for customers. Not just implement like a solution architect, but like you can be a project manager. You could be a developer. Like a pro. A pro is when you're not just using it within your company, but you're actually working for a partner, right? A Dynamics 365 partner. So most MVPs are pros, I would say, but not all of us are pros. One example is Clarissa Simpson, for example. Clarissa works for Ford Motor Company at the moment. She, works obviously with their CRM implementation, their Dynamics 365 implementation internally, but she doesn't implement it for anybody else. She doesn't work for a partner. And we have a couple of other MVPs who work for customers or work for ISVs or something else, but you don't have to do that. I've encouraged multiple customers of mine in the past that they've talked about, being an MVP or becoming an MVP, to go for it, to just go and, get engaged with CRM user group and, talk about it from the customer perspective. I think that the customer viewpoint and the customer lessons learned, it's something that we're lacking on the family. And the fact that, we could potentially have 10, 20, 30 MVPs that are customers, right? Chiming in at the MVP summit, chiming in into our, I don't want to break NDA, but into our, let's say, variety of options in which we can talk to the product team and provide feedback. I think that would be amazing, right? Because as much as I work with customers and as much as I gather feedback and I can pass it to Microsoft, it's never going to be as good as the customers doing it themselves. So I wish more customers would take it upon themselves to, go for it and become an MVP. So that's just my take on that. So no, not every MVP will, is a pro or work for a partner. I think most of us happen to be, but not all of us are. And I think that if you look at other products, that gap is even further. Like if you look at Office and stuff like that, I think that, I don't want to say 50-50, but I would say that a lot of MVPs won't be pros, right? So other products it will be a lot more common to just have regular users be MVPs. All right, this one is another one, and again, if you ask my wife, you get a different answer on this one. But the other misconception is that we don't have any work-life balance. Like we're always doing community work, we're always doing MVP work, or we're doing work, right? So we're doing our jobs or we're doing MVP work. Like we're doing either one, but we don't have time for anything else. Well, again, this all depends on how much work-life balance you want to have. I think that, for me, I love to merge things together. For me, for example, in order for me to be an effective solution architect, I have to stay on top of things. I have to play with new technology every time Microsoft comes up with a new feature, every time they announce a new solution or a new acquisition or whatever it is. I need to be on top of it. So that to me makes me a more effective solution architect. It also makes me learn new things that I can share, which will then count as MVP contributions. It also gives me a ton of inspiration for 2-Minute Tuesdays and for, podcast episodes and things like that. So one activity that I do helps me in multiple things in life. And if you look, for example, at, let's say, the 2-Minute Tuesday videos that are in our YouTube channel, and if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go ahead and do that. I see that there's a lot more people that listen to the podcast that, are subscribed to our YouTube channel. You should probably be tuning into that. There's a lot of good stuff there. But if you notice, a lot of the videos are just me essentially taking a camera and hitting record wherever I happen to be at that given time. Like I'm not going out of my way to record a video. I'm not doing this elaborate production or anything like that. Like I'll have a video in my backyard, or I'll have a video, on vacation somewhere. Like if I happen to be on vacation and the kids are like, my wife is giving the kids a bath or something like that. Like I'll just hit the camera and start talking. Like it's just like it for me is not. I don't need to prepare for this stuff. I'll just go at it, whatever I am at any given time. But it all depends on how much are you willing to set aside to enjoy life, essentially. Like, I'm friends with a lot of MVPs on Facebook. Facebook is kind of the only social network that I don't use for work stuff. I mainly use it for, just non-work stuff. Just like, I went to see Joker or whatever. Like I just do it for non-work related stuff. And I'm friends with a lot of other MVPs, and I get to see the stuff that they do. And they like to go to the beach. They like to, go water skiing or whatever it is. Everybody has hobbies. Somebody's a photographer. Somebody is into, check out my new, Tesla Model 3 that I just bought. And like everybody's doing their own thing, and they are still able to keep up with work and keep up with with their MVP contributions. Because in a lot of cases, the MVP contributions, right, quote unquote, it's a product of you doing your job, right? In order for you to be effective at what you do for a living, you still have to research and play with stuff that then we get to share with the community and get the essentially credit as an MVP contribution. For me, for example, something interesting I've been doing for the last several years is that every year, kind of I don't know if I would call this like a New Year's resolution, but every year I get to pick a skill or something that I want to master or learn that year. So every year I kind of set myself a challenge and I try to make it happen. Now, it's not like a do or die thing. Like I don't try to, it's like I have to do it no matter what, but I try to do it. So like a couple of years ago, I wanted to learn how to scuba dive. So that was, one thing that I wanted to learn how to do. I've always wanted to learn how to scuba dive. I happened to be going to Iceland, and Iceland happens to be one of those bucket list scuba dive places for a lot of people. So I said, okay, since I'm going to Iceland for vacation for a week, and a lot of people say that, you should go scuba diving in Iceland, well, this might be the year where I need to learn how to scuba dive. So I did that. I learned how to scuba dive. I went scuba diving in Iceland. It was epic. And I've been scuba diving since then. I'm a master scuba diver now, working my way up to instructor at some point. And that works great. Then, the year after that, I wanted to learn how to drive boats because, why not? And I got a boat and I learned how to do it. And now I know how to drive boats. And then this year I took on learning how to fly planes. So I'm about 25 hours into my pilot training. And that's what I'm doing. And then next year I'll pick something else. And I'm saving all the easy stuff for like the years that I just want to knock out something quickly. Like I still have, for example, learning how to ride a motorcycle. I don't know how to do that. I only know how to do scooters, but come on. If you know how to ride a bicycle, you can do a scooter. So that doesn't count. I want to learn how to ride like a Harley or something, like a big motorcycle. Not necessarily Harley, but you know what I'm saying, like a manual motorcycle. I want to learn how to golf. I've never done that. Let's see. Yeah, so stuff like that. So I'll pick, a skill, something I want to learn how to do, and then I'll do it. And that's it. Yeah. So I don't like drop everything I'm doing and do it. So for example, if you think about it, like the whole pilot thing. So if I count my hours of training, I'll probably have about 22 to 25 hours. That is since January. So it's October now. 25 hours in 10 months is not like the whole, huge commitment that most people would expect, but it's, I do it. It's a hobby. I do it a couple hours a month or whatever it is, and whenever I can, and it's fun. And I can fly a plane now. I don't have a license. I can take any passengers, but I can fly a plane, which is cool. All right. Enough about me. So the whole myth that we don't have any work-life balance, that's just a misconception. We do have it. Maybe not more than people that are non-MVPs, but we do have it. All right. Here's an interesting one. Next is that we get paid to do what we do, meaning go to conferences, write blogs, record podcasts, stuff like that. As I mentioned earlier, I don't get paid to record this stuff, to record podcasts or to speak at conferences or anything like that. In some cases, you may get, a conference to, let's say, cover your hotel room or something like that. I know that Ignite does that. I think that Ignite, maybe I've never been a speaker at Ignite, where I think they give you like a flat fee for like your flight and hotel or something like that. But we never really get compensated for it. If we get compensated for it, we couldn't count it as a contribution for the community. We wouldn't be able to count it as an MVP contribution. So the condition is, in order for it to count as an MVP contribution, it cannot be your job. It cannot be paid. So the idea that we get paid to go to conferences and speak, that's not true. I did 10 sessions or 10 events, because some of them were panels, some of them were sessions on my own, some of them were classes that I delivered. The idea that I got paid to do all that stuff is not true. I go and I speak, and it's something that I do because I'm an MVP. And it's funny, I had that conversation with a brand new MVP once, because I invited her to come and speak at a Dynamics 365 Saturday event. and she mentioned that, oh, I got my MVP award, but I don't think my boss will give me, the time off to travel. And and I said, and she said, how do I ask for it? How do you do it? How do you ask for the time off? And I said, well, what I say is, I'm an MVP. Like, that's what I do. She was trying to figure out a way to justify it. And that's something that I never understood. Like, people trying to justify, like, what if I go and maybe we'll get a deal? Like, if you work for a partner, people will do this, and they'll say something like, you should send me there because maybe I'll go and I'll get a deal and that will pay for the trip. Like, when you try to gamble like that, like, I would never understand that. Like, I'd rather someone ask me, and obviously I have the advantage, which is I own the company, so I don't have to ask anybody. But if, when I work for a partner, I'd rather be honest and be like, look, I'm an MVP. MVPs have to speak at conferences. They're covering my travel. Like, just let me go. Like, that is the honest truth. The same thing with the MVP Summit. Like, I know I'm not going to go to the MVP Summit and get a customer or anything like that. I go to the MVP Summit because I'm going to go learn what Microsoft is doing for the next year and a half or the next year to the next year and a half, and we're going to provide feedback on that. That's my job as an MVP. Let me go, right? So I mentioned that to her, and obviously she was new, so it was like, yeah, I don't know if I can do that, and so on. But that's essentially what we do. So if you're listening to this, and if you're an MVP and you're brand new, or you're about to get it, or if you're aspiring to be an MVP and you're trying to figure it out, if you're gonna ask to go to a conference and you have been offered an opportunity to be a speaker at a conference, you're working your way up to become an MVP. Just don't sugarcoat it, right? Just go to your manager and be like, hey, I've been invited to be a speaker at the CRM User Group Summit, at Extreme, or whatever it is. And I need to go because that's what I do. Like, I'm a speaker, I'm an MVP, or I'm a community superstar, whatever it is. I need to go and do it, and that's it. So we don't get paid for what we do. If we got paid for what we do, we wouldn't be MVPs. Again, that is the condition. We cannot be paid, or else we wouldn't be able to count it as contributions. And if we don't have any contributions, we don't get the award. So think about that, as you go in the future. That's essentially it. We don't get paid to deliver sessions. All right. The other thing that I think is interesting is that another misconception is that we get tons of free stuff. Wow, I bet they get so much free stuff. Well, I don't know who gets free stuff. I don't get free stuff. I wish I got free stuff. The truth is, when you become an MVP, you do get some free stuff, and I don't complain about it. I think it's awesome. I wouldn't call it a ton of free stuff, but the free stuff that we do get is awesome. The one that I use the most, and I, shamelessly, say that I love it, is the TechSmith stuff. We do get free licenses to Camtasia. We get free licenses to Snagit. I use Camtasia and Snagit all the time. I don't know if it's daily, but close to daily. I use that stuff. If you don't use Camtasia for your video editing and Snagit for taking screenshots and stuff, I don't know what you're doing. Honestly, it's like the easiest thing in the world. So I love to use it. I don't get paid, to do this or to say this. Honestly, I was using it before I became an MVP. When I became an MVP and they gave me a free license, obviously it was a lot easier for me, so I didn't have to buy every single version after that. But I love Camtasia, and I have the Adobe suite, by the way, and I only use Audition out of it. So as an MVP, we don't get Adobe for free. I just really love the Audition suite for recording this podcast. But man, Camtasia is awesome when it comes to video and stuff. So we do get free Camtasia and Snagit, so I love using that. And we do get some other free software. A lot of the tools that we get for free are more for the Azure side, so I don't use that a whole lot. We get free antivirus. I think it's ESET antivirus. We get a few free things, again, for becoming an MVP. There are some other things, some other tools also that we get. We get a free membership to CRM User Group. As an MVP, we get, in a lot of cases, vendors like ISVs will let you, have their free version of their software as an ISV. So If you're an MVP, you can have their free version. So we do get some free stuff, but we don't get bombarded with free stuff from Microsoft, like backpacks and stuff like that. That's not how it works. If you see an MVP walking around with, a Microsoft backpack, 99% chance they bought that stuff. Like, it's not, we don't get free stuff like that. We do get, or we used to get, I don't even think we got it this year. We used to get a jacket every year for the MVP Summit. I think in 2012 or 2013, we got a voucher to buy a Surface 2. I think we're already at Surface 7 or Surface 8 or something like that. But we got a Surface 2, which wasn't the Surface 2 Pro. It was like the RT, the cheap version. And I think it was for $150 or something. So it was like a reduced price, like a 50% off. Like, that was it. That was the best thing we ever got. Again, I'm not complaining. So if someone from Microsoft is listening to this, I'm not expecting to get a bunch of free stuff. It's just that this is a misconception. Like, people see me sometimes with, a backpack that has Microsoft on it or whatever it is, and they're like, oh, I bet you get a bunch of free stuff. We don't. I don't expect to get free stuff, by the way, but we don't get a bunch of free stuff, automatically just by being an MVP. That's not how it works. I think I already talked about this one, which is the fact that we attend all conferences for free and, they pay for travel and everything. Nope, that's not true. One good example is, let's say, Inspire, which is the conference that Microsoft does in Las Vegas in July. Well, at least they've done it in Vegas for the last 2 years, and I think it's going to be in Vegas for a few years to come. I paid for that. I went to it last year, and I think it was $1,500 or $2,000 or something like that, and I paid for that out of pocket. So no, we don't get to go to conferences for free. Another one, the Business Application Summit this year in Atlanta. I didn't get to go for free to that one. The only reason why I got to attend for free was because Inajek, who's an ISV company from India who has amazing products, by the way, so shout out to them. They're not paying me to say this. They gave me a pass for the conference. They were like, hey, since you live in Atlanta, we have an extra pass. You want to come along? So they invited me as a guest, but I didn't get a pass for free. So no, MVPs don't just automatically get a conference pass to go for free. So that's not an auto benefit. You have to kind of earn it. You have to be a speaker, just like any other speaker, essentially. So that's another misconception. You don't automatically get invited to every single conference and get the red carpet, rolled out for you. That's not how it works. All right, here's a common one, which is, I don't know why people think this, and I think it's because of Salesforce, and I'll explain more in a second. And I think the next two are kind of connected. So I'm going to talk about both of them at the same time because we're pushing it into the hour by now. But the next one is the Microsoft controls what we can and can't say. And that is connected to the next one, which is that we cannot criticize Microsoft. Okay, so we have those two kind of connected together. Now, the reason why I say I think this is connected to Salesforce is because Salesforce MVPs, because they also have MVPs, obviously, they are actually heavily monitored and policed by Salesforce. And I know this because I have invited multiple MVPs, Salesforce MVPs, to show up and appear on my show, on the CRM MVP podcast, and this show that you're listening to. I have invited several from Atlanta. There's a couple of MVPs in Atlanta that I've invited. I'm like, I'll come to your office. We can meet at a neutral place. You can come to my house. Like, whatever you want. We'll meet anywhere, anytime. Like, I'll make it work. We'll be remote, however you want. I've invited Mark Benioff, who follows me on Twitter. Like, I've invited, like, I don't know how many Salesforce MVPs by now, and everyone dodges me. There was only one MVP that was straight up honest with me and said, I would really want to do the show, but we cannot get clearance from Salesforce to appear on the show. I don't even know what that means because Microsoft never controls or polices what we say. We can criticize Microsoft. We can say whatever we want. Now, that's not to say that there are no consequences to what we say. If you go out there and share something that is under your non-disclosure agreement, you can lose your MVP award. So do you have to get clearance ahead of time to share something on a podcast like this one? No, I didn't go to Microsoft and share my list of frequent misconceptions with them and be like, hey, are you cool if I talk about this? No, of course not. For none of my episodes, I have reached out to Microsoft and asked them if they're cool with it. None, never, right? But at the same time, I know that if I break my NDA, I will lose my award. That is a contract that I signed with them when I get my award. And maybe some other day I should talk about what happens when you get your MVP award. But I don't even remember. I would have to bring a brand new MVP to talk about it because it will be fresh in their head. But anyway, so you don't have to, Microsoft doesn't police us. It doesn't tell us what to say. It doesn't give us talking points. I don't know if Salesforce does that with their Salesforce MVPs and tells them exactly what to say. Probably not. I don't think it goes that deep. It's not, North Korea level of policing, I assume. But the reality is that based on what I see on the conversations I've had with Salesforce MVPs, they cannot make appearances and things like a podcast without getting prior approval from Salesforce, which I think is totally ridiculous because you're supposed to be independent, right? Independent experts that are able to talk about, whatever technology you're working with. So the fact, I've criticized Microsoft many times. I praise them on everything. I agree with them, but I'm an independent thinker. Like I'm available. I'm able to say if I, agree or disagree with their direction or not. I mean, that is my thought process, and it's not connected to me being an MVP or not. Like if Microsoft felt that me saying that, I still prefer unmanaged solutions, on top of managed solutions, because I feel that, it's more predictive and it's better in the real world to use unmanaged solutions than managed solutions. If they feel that is, I don't want to say a crime, but if that is something that I deserve to lose my MVP award over, then they can take it away. They can go ahead and take it. But I'm not going to not say it if that's what I really believe, right? They're not going to take that away because that's not part of being an MVP. Like Microsoft is not out there to, filter what we say. So again, and I guess you could say that this is kind of connected to the fact that, the misconception, the first one that is that we all work for Microsoft. We don't work for Microsoft. We are not connected to Microsoft. They don't control what we say. We don't have to clear anything with the PR department or whatever. Now, if I was going to, let's say, interview Satya Nadella on the podcast, then probably the PR department or the marketing department, I don't know, the legal department, I don't even know who would get involved at that point and maybe look at the questions that I'm going to ask ahead of time. I don't know how that process works. Satya would never be on this show, I assume. If Satya, if you're listening to this, you're always welcome. But I assume that process will take place because a Microsoft employee is going to be on the show, not because I'm doing the show, not because an MVP is doing the show. So again, Microsoft does not control what any of the MVPs say. If that's the case, then I think Steve Mordew, would I don't think he would have a website to begin with. So again, we don't get filtered or controlled in any way. All right, we're getting to the end of the list here. I have only a couple more to go. The other one is that we run away from criticism when it comes to Dynamics 365 or anything that attacks Dynamics 365. We're kind of like we're not having it. We're not going to listen to it. This happened to me recently. I'm trying to remember what event it was. It wasn't at the CRM MVPs Summit they just finished. It was either Dynamics 365 Saturday or something else. Maybe it was, I think it was, I was working, I was at an MVP gathering of some kind, and the guy that I was working with, he was an MVP on a technology, but his company used Salesforce, and they were criticizing Dynamics or something like that. And I don't remember the circumstances, but the expectation was that I wasn't gonna hear it, and that's not the case. I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is that every single CRM MVP out there, Dynamics 365 MVP, thinks bad about Salesforce, and that's not the case. Like when I talk to prospects and they ask me, what do you think about Salesforce? And I always say, like, I think it's a great solution. I think it's a great system. You just have to know how to implement it, and it has a bunch of flaws. Like, for example, the fact that it doesn't connect to a bunch of different applications that you need in order to really get the full customer picture, right? The full 360-degree view of your customer. So I think that it has a lot of gaps that you actually need to have a full solution. But other than that, I think that it's a good product. I'm not gonna go and say that it's awful just because it's not Microsoft. No, that's I'm not totally Microsoft fanboy over this thing. So no, we're never going to shy away from criticism of Dynamics. As a matter of fact, in a lot of cases, we are the ones providing the criticism because we believe that criticism, constructive criticism, is the one that is going to actually improve the product as a whole. So no, we don't shy away from criticism. We don't, avoid it. We'll talk to anyone. And again, if you're a Salesforce MVP and you're listening to this thing, and you have a podcast, I'm in. Invite me. Let's do it. Let's talk about it. Salesforce versus Dynamics all day, every day. I don't have to prepare. Let's do it. So yeah, no, I'm not gonna run away from it. Another one. We all make a lot of money. That's another one that is interesting. That you hear out there. It's like, oh, he's an MVP. I bet he makes a lot of money. No, like the MVP award is not a job. It's not something you do. Nobody has that as a job and you get paid for it. Like you're never going to find Microsoft MVP at glassdoor.com with a salary or something like that. So your salary and the money that you make is connected really to the job that you do. You're an MVP plus something. Like the MVP is just the award that you have is kind of on top of your role. So if you're an MVP and you're a solution architect, you have your salary. And then if you're an MVP and you're a developer, you have a different salary. It could be more, it could be less, depending on your experience, where you live, a bunch of different things, right? So not all Microsoft MVPs make a lot of money. There are MVPs that make a lot of money because of what they do, because they own their business, because they're really amazing developers, because they're really amazing trainers or whatever it is. But the fact that they're MVPs it just happens to be a coincidence. They make a lot of money because they're really good at what they do, not because they're MVPs. To be honest with you, and I don't know if I should be disclosing this, but when I got my MVP award, I received a bonus of a whopping sum of $500. That was my bonus. And I'm not complaining, by the way. I didn't deserve a bonus for becoming an MVP. I think that the MVP award was good enough for me, and it was a one-time bonus, by the way. It wasn't a raise, so I'm thankful for that. I'm not whining about it or complaining at all about this, but it's just so you put it in perspective. It wasn't something that was life-changing or career-changing for me. I got my award in 2012. I got a one-time bonus. That was awesome that you got your award. Here's, $500 for you so you can, do something nice, take your wife out to dinner, whatever, celebrate, the company appreciate what you've done. Again, I didn't think I deserved it. I still don't think I deserved it. I didn't give it back, obviously, but I appreciate the bonus, and that was it. And I continue my salary, continue my job. I was a solution architect then. I'm still a solution architect today. Nothing really changed. So no, just being an MVP doesn't mean automatically that you make a lot of money. That's not how it works. All right, next, closer to the end. We all went to college and graduated as either a computer engineer or computer scientist. Nope, that's not true. That's another misconception. I think most of us landed on a Dynamics 365 career by accident, to be honest. Most of us were not planning on becoming Dynamics 365 anything. We just landed on it. For me, I used to be a full-time trainer before really working with Dynamics 365. I mean, I installed it and I was an administrator, but that was just one of the systems that I maintain. I also maintain Exchange and SharePoint and ISA Server and SQL Server and Goldmine and, before Dynamics. So I was the IT guy. Then after that, I became a full-time instructor at New Horizons Computer Learning Centers, and I was teaching everything that Microsoft made that ended with the word server on it. And after the economy went down in 2008, Dynamics CRM back in the day partner called me up and they said, "Hey, we need somebody that knows the technology. Do you know CRM?" And I said, "I've only installed it once. It was 3.0." And they said, "Well, you know everything else, so we'll teach you the rest." And it's true. I knew Citrix, I knew Cisco, I knew Microsoft, I knew pretty much everything around CRM. And, it took me a couple months to get very familiar with Microsoft Dynamics CRM. And then I knew it all. And I became the technical lead for the organization. And that's how I became a pro. It was kind of an accident. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Losing my job. And I was the highest paid instructor at New Horizons, when I left. And the most senior instructor there. I was teaching, all the high-level architecture courses there. And I felt on the top of the world. I was getting paid to talk about computers all day. Like, you think I love talking about computers for an hour? Imagine if I did that 8 hours a day. Like, it was the best job ever, right? I enjoy it right now, talking for an hour to you guys, and I'm not getting paid. Imagine getting paid. Like, it was the best ever. So I lost my job. I was devastated. And it was sort of like, okay, now I'm going to go and learn this dynamic CRM thing again. It's version 4 now, which I haven't worked with. This is going to be crazy. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the best tragedy ever, right? It was the worst of times and the best of times kind of thing. And it was an accident. And if you start asking MVPs around, like, you will find that, we have MVPs that have an MBA. We have MVPs that, that have a degree in art or social studies or physics. I remember that I told when I met Leon Tribe, an MVP from Australia, I told Leon this joke, and I was kind of like gambling our friendship on this joke because it was the day I met him. So I just recently heard this joke. So all right, so the full story is I had started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu about like 6 months or a year before I became an MVP. I think I started doing Jiu-Jitsu in 2010, and I became an MVP in 2012. So I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a couple of years, and one of the guys in my school, Alliance Jiu-Jitsu in Atlanta, JT was a physics PhD student at Georgia Tech. Super smart guy, brown belt, a beast, right? And so JT had like the weirdest sense of humor. And he told his joke about somebody with a physics degree. So when I met Leon and I heard that he had a physics degree, I'm like, well, I'm going to tell his joke. Worst case scenario, he gets upset. I do jiu-jitsu, so I'll just choke him out. So I got all bases covered, right? He's a physics major. Like, what's the worst that can happen? That's kind of how I went about it. So I told Leon, he's like, oh, so you're a physics major. Cool. Hey, you know the difference between a physics degree and a pizza? And he's like, what's that? And he's like, you can feed a family with a pizza. So he just started laughing uncontrollably, and now we've been, like best buddies ever since. So Leon is like one of my best friends on the MVP family. And again, he's one of those the vast majority of MVPs who landed on Dynamics 365 and never went to college to study computer science or whatever it was to become a Dynamics consultant or anything like that. He kind of landed on it. Most of us did. I think George Dubinsky. George has, if you, like I just talked earlier about watching Joker like 10 days ago or whatever, like day premiere. And George Dubinsky has the weirdest story. Like if you look at Joker or whatever, where he has he says that he wants his past to be multiple choice, like his origin to be multiple choice. That's how I feel George Dubinsky's story is, because you ask him and he's done everything. Like I think he has a degree in nuclear science or something like that. Like I think he was in Chernobyl. Honestly, he has something to do with Chernobyl. I am positive. I'm gonna start that rumor right now. He had something to do with that disaster. And then from that, he started selling helicopters. And from selling helicopters, he started developing for Dynamics. So he's done all kinds of stuff. So George Dubinsky has a super interesting story. Once again, he just kind of landed on it. Literally, from a helicopter, he landed into a Dynamics career. So no, not all of us went to college. I happen to be a computer engineer. All by accident. I happened to land in Dynamics 365, but I never set out to do a career in Dynamics 365. I think the only one I've ever heard that said that he actually wanted, like, specifically getting to Dynamics 365 was Mark Smith. I think I was talking to Mark and he said he was an MCT, he was teaching, and he heard about, somebody looking for someone to teach him Dynamics 365, and he wasn't teaching it yet, but he did some research and he saw that it was kind of like blowing up, or he was coming up, so he was purposeful about, okay, I need to learn this stuff, and he like purposely learned the stuff to become a Dynamics 365 professional. But most of us just landed on it by accident and kind of learned on the job. So that's kind of how it went. All right, last on the list, and we went over an hour with this one, but I promise you this is the final one on the list, and this is perhaps the biggest misconception of them all, is that most people think that Microsoft MVPs like myself always know what Microsoft is going to do about Dynamics 365 or the Power Platform in advance. We don't always know that. Now, we do have NDAs. We do know a lot of it in advance. That's why we have the MVP Summit. We'd have an opportunity to meet with Microsoft, and they have an opportunity to get feedback from us. And in a lot of cases, and I don't want to go into details, I don't want to break my NDA. In a lot of cases, it goes both ways. It's not only what they're planning to do in terms of adding things, but in some cases they talk about removing things too. So like, we're thinking about what would it be like if we replace this with that or whatever, and we provide feedback for that. So that's great. But in some cases, I mean, it's straight up out of the blue. Like, here is AI for sales. Oh, wow. Like it's all brand new for everybody. So there are some announcements. Like, anytime you see licensing changes, for the most part, we don't know about it until, in some cases we know like a week before, perhaps a month before. In a lot of functionality, we know sometimes 12 months before, sometimes 18 months before what Microsoft is doing. But there are some announcements that we find out alongside everyone else. We find out with everybody else. We find out a week before. We find out days before. I've seen some announcements where it comes out on Friday and they say on Monday we'll be announcing this. And we're letting you guys know, by the way, this is what's going to come out on Monday. This is under NDA, but go ahead and start reading it, get familiar with it. That way you guys can, kind of announce it and answer questions and stuff like that. Sometimes we have calls with the product team before an announcement is made, so we get to ask a bunch of questions that a lot of you guys will ask, so we get to answer them and kind of help Microsoft answer those questions, kind of a force multiplier. So it all depends on the announcement, but the idea that we always know what Microsoft is doing and we always know in advance single decision that Microsoft does, that's just not true. I would say, if I put it in perspective, if I think about 100% of everything that Microsoft, announces or releases in a year, I would say MVPs will know about 95% of it in advance. We will know. We've been playing with it for months, that kind of thing. We know what's up. But then there's always 5 to 10% of it that it's brand new. It's a surprise for us. So there's some stuff that will be brand new. There's some stuff that we'll have no clue. If you see some surprise faces on the MVPs, they're typically going to be legitimate. And then you will have some brand new features that you stop by the Medics booth, or you ask on social media, or you ask an MVP. If you're lucky enough, again, to have a solution architect or somebody, your partner or whatever, to be an MVP, you ask them and they seem to have all the answers, because they already knew for months, what was going on. So again, we don't always know what Microsoft is going to do. That's fine. I mean, that's the nature of business, especially when it comes to an acquisition or something. Microsoft is not going to come and be like, hey, we're looking into acquiring Compaq or whatever. I don't know. Compaq was acquired by HP. That's probably a stupid example, but I'm just saying they're not going to come to us and tell us they're looking into some company to, think about buying or whatever. Like who are like, yeah, like I'm going to be giving them advice on whether they should buy such and such company. No, of course not. Like, they're not going to come to us and ask us for anything or telling us they're thinking about buying anybody. Of course not. Like, that's probably super illegal if they did that. So there's a lot of stuff like that they're just not going to tell us. But when it comes to features, for the most part, they do a great job gathering feedback. Of course, they want to spend time and money wisely. And wisely means we want to spend time and money on functionality that the public, the users, the customers will need. And in a lot of cases, the best group of people to gauge whether functionality is going to be effective and used are the Microsoft MVPs. And that's why we need more MVPs at our customers too, like I mentioned earlier. So that is my list of frequent misconceptions about MVPs. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. Again, I apologize if you were expecting something technical this week. I wanted to just kind of have fun after a week of all technical discussions and meetings and sessions and stuff like that, give you a break from that. Hopefully you were inspired this week as well after talking to some of us in Orlando. Maybe you decide to pursue this as an achievement to add to your list of achievements in your career, and join the family. We want you to join the family. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to see you prosper and join the ranks of the MVPs. And obviously I want to see you tuning in into future episodes of the CRM MVP podcast as well. You can find them all at crmmvppodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at CRM MVP podcast for news about new episodes and future episodes and guests as well. If you have any questions or comments, don't forget to drop us a comment on the show or to send us an email at info@crmmvppodcast.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.